Good. I hope you all can see and hear me. Is sound and vision already running? Good. Fine. Thank you. I will take you to Uppåkra, which is a site close to Lund, and I will try to give a reference to what is going on, but also a short introduction to the site itself, because many of you might not know of the extension of the site in space and time. But I will focus mostly on research and public outreach, how we can combine these two things. We have already going on cooperation and regional dissemination on the site. But the ArchaeoBalt project has created new possibilities, and I try to emphasize them in my lecture. As a scholar, I'm not used to working very much with media or disseminating our results. Of course, we are encouraged to do so, and we do it all the time. But to have an ongoing, continuous information flow is very difficult. On this slide, you can see some of the huge, the very large centers that are well known. You might know Stonehenge. But there are several others in Europe. Bibracte in France is a very old site and very luckily expanding still, combining research, museum and ongoing guiding on the site. But how can we manage these sites? We are only living in one life as a scholar. And how can we make it last? And which concepts can secure lasting information of these results? First, about the site itself, Uppåkra. It's one of the largest sites in a cluster of very interesting centers from the Iron Age. Many of them, they come and go from the 1st century AD and disappear. But Uppåkra is one of the few sites that actually lingers on for a very, very long time. It's supposed to be a center from 200 AD, late Roman Iron Age, up to its closure as a central place in the end of the 10th century. And I'll give you some proportions. If you look at this map, which is showing the phosphates in the plain of southwest Skåne, it's Lund and Malmö, and in between them you can see a fantastic, let's see, a pencil, a huge site, totally black with phosphates, indicating an ongoing settlement for many, many years, many centuries actually. And it contrasts with the rest of the small blobs on the plain. On the site, we are mostly focusing on the settlement and the findings, but we must think about Uppåkra as a part of a larger landscape, which you can see here, between the rivers of Segeå in the south and Höjeå in the north. In between those small rivers, we have probably a domain with a large estate, which is Uppåkra. If we put the site Uppåkra, which is 40 hectares, inside the medieval boundaries of Lund, we get the picture you can see on the left side here. It's rather big. So it's as big as medieval Lund in some sense, or the old town in Stockholm. And we can also see some proportions in quantity. We have 28,000 metal artifacts found through metal detecting. And many of the very, very nice people from Bornholm have been cooperating with us for several years. We have hundreds of houses and deposits 1.5 to 2 meters deep, but only 0.1% is investigated. So we have a serious problem to understand how the settlement worked through time and space. We also have a very high proportion of high quality artisanal production, from all through the Iron Age, which points out the ambition of the dynasties living here. We also have interregional trade, signals of interregional trade. However, we mustn't look at this site as a town or a trading place. It's more like a large domain with an estate, which draws interest to it with a great agrarian surplus. It's also a complex site, which is very difficult to understand if we haven't excavated so much. And it's also a very strong continuity over time, as you can see, beginning from 100 BC until second half of the 10th century. This map from Manuel Gabler's dissertation from 2018 shows the spread of older metal artifacts. From 1996, the Professor Emeriti Lars Larsen and Birgitta Hård worked a lot with the site and found a tremendously amount of artifacts, which shows that the site was already large and populated by several groups of houses from the birth of Christ. The interpretation Manuel Gabler has done with the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute in Vienna has exposed groups of houses in clusters. You can see the sub-areas here from his dissertation. And through the years, we have focused very much on finding out if all these houses are small villages themselves, or if you have different zones of different functional zones, which is one question we're working with right now. If we center on the church in Uppåkra and on the few but very important sites excavated on in the area, you can see the red circle encircling a huge hall building to the left and a smaller black building with 4 post holes on the right of that. And this is, you could say, the political and religious center of Uppåkra. Birgitta Hård and Lars Larsen and colleagues made excavations in the 2000s and had you could say stroke luck, stroke gold, finding this temple, which is one of the only temples we have a notion of in northern Europe. And the extraordinary situation is that we have several floor layers, up to 9 floor layers, from 200 AD to mid-10th century, showing that there was a tremendous effort being made to maintain the temple or cult house for several hundreds of years, despite the fact that the dynasties probably changed over time. So this is the center for the rituals and riches, the hall and the temple. And it's a part of a Germanic worldview, you could say, a duality where you had social display and recurrent gatherings, very much important for the community itself, not only on site, but also on a much wider scale, probably the whole west of Scania. But luck never lasts, as we say. And in the end of the 10th century, there was a big change, political change, with a dynasty from Jutland taking over the eastern part of the Danish realm. And they moved from Uppåkra to Lund. Uppåkra is still there, but it lost its importance as a center. And Lund was established around 970, 980. And it's only 5 kilometers away, which is a bit strange. Why move over to the other side of the river? And we have many different ideas of why that happened. And many of us think it has to do with the very continuous and long and strong pagan tradition that that lingered in Uppåkra. But still, when the king established his royal estate in Lund, he still had Uppåkra as a pantry. It was later donated to the cathedral in Lund in 1085. And that shows that it was still an economic, very important place. So that was a very short introduction to the Uppåkra site. I could go on for 2 hours about it, but just to know a little. And the important questions for today are directed towards the dissemination of the knowledge we have there. And already before the ArchaeoBalt project came on, we had already ongoing cooperation with regional partners. Of course, one of our most important partners is the Historical Museum of Lund University, which is responsible for the artifacts, for taking care of them, storage, but also exhibitions, guided tours, and pedagogical work. And it is the artifacts are displayed in the exhibition Barbaricum. Hopefully, we will in the future have funding for changing the exhibition and also rebuild it. Another important part is the Uppåkra Archaeological Center, which is a foundation situated out in Uppåkra, working with brilliant programs for schools, an archaeology school for pupils, as you can see here, lectures for the public, the guides and our colleagues working there, they go out in the schools and also work a lot with guided tours in different languages. So of course they have already from the beginning, since they started in 2009, been very important for us. And through the Uppåkra Archaeological Center, there's also started a very, very nice and interesting event every year, the Vendela Days. The Merovingian period is enhanced, and I think it's brilliant because we are so overwhelmed with Viking Age in Scandinavia. It's very popular. So if we look at the artifact assemblages and also some of the larger settlements around Uppåkra, it's actually the Vendel period and the form of migration period that is the most obvious periods of wealth on the site. It's extremely wealthy with gold and international connections, but it takes a pedagogical effort to explain this to the public. The public demands Vikings when they come to Scandinavia, but it is it's interesting to change the views. So you could say it's a scholarly effort as well as a very nice effort by the Uppåkra Archaeological Center to try to turn the heads and the minds a little bit away from the Vikings to this more sophisticated period with gold, amber, and silver. This has been going on for some years now, 2 or 3 years, and last year there were 7,000 visitors coming on two very sunny and hot days in the summer. In archaeology, coming from university, we don't have these possibilities as the museum and the archaeological center have. Of course, we always have a possibility to contact the press, all sorts of media. And the ArchaeoBalt project has given us a fantastic opportunity to expand the interfaces with the public. We are maintaining our yearly seminar excavations at Uppåkra and focusing the last 2 years and in the future couple of years on a very, you could say, simple household site within this huge settlement. There has been so much focus on the center of the settlement, of the temple and the hall building. So we need to know what ordinary people did. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, how did they live and what did they do? And we find brilliant things like a lot of beads, of course, that reticella piece, the small piece down to the left, that's a goblet, a glass vessel from the continent being used during the Merovingian Viking Age period here. So it was not poor people, you could say, but it's an ordinary household. The students, they are cooperating with the Uppåkra Archaeological Center and try to enhance the experience of the visitors to the center. Cooperating with the guides from the center, the students can present the everyday findings straight from the earth to the people coming. And they also get, the students themselves get fantastic opportunities to talk to people and learn how to behave with large groups, which is splendid. But we also have other types of public outreach. Thanks to the ArchaeoBalt project, we cooperate with other NGOs, like this Scanian Heritage Association, making bus tours with a stop in Uppåkra. This was a very rainy day, as you can see, but still, hundreds of people came and participated. We have also had several lectures organized by the Rotary societies in the region and also other smaller museums. So we are not only disseminating our experiences on site, but we are reaching out to other places with other people. But also, since Uppåkra is a national interest, we try to get in touch with other regions. And of course, Stockholm is the capital, and we have to be present there. We had a lecture at the State Historical Museum, which is the biggest museum in Sweden, with the Swedish Antiquities Association, that brought at least 150 people, 200 people to the lecture. So we could see that Uppåkra is very interesting, not only for people here in the South Baltic region, but also on a national basis. But the ArchaeoBalt project is a transnational experience. And there are difficulties with transnational cultural heritage sites. We have the language problem. My Polish is not so well, and I can speak a little Danish, so to speak. But how do we cope with these difficulties? And also, how can we bring our sites together? We use 360 degrees cameras to show our sites. We just started, and we will launch it as a full experience this summer. So visitors can participate using virtual glasses on site. They can stand exactly on the spot where the camera has been and move in time to the time when they took the video, so to speak. But we can also do armchair traveling, which is today a very good idea with the pandemic going on. But virtual experiences, they are not enough. As an archaeologist, I love physical experiences, the landscape, the artifacts to be present. And there is a huge interest in coming to excavations just to watch archaeologists, to watch how we work and how we reach our conclusions. So we have some challenges for the future. We have done a lot of interesting things, and I put some questions here which could be used for discussions later on in the end of this webinar. How can we improve the transnational experiences of our sites by connecting common histories? Of course, being a medieval archaeologist, for me it's natural to talk about the Christianization process in the end of the 10th century, which is on exactly the same time in Piast, Poland, in Denmark, and it's starting in Sweden at least. Also, during that period, there were a lot of intermarriages and political ordeals between Poland, Denmark, and Sweden. We must also consider some theoretical aspects, like building the consciousness how cultural heritage and history is created used and abused, and ask ourselves, what kind of narratives are we producing or reproducing in our project? And also, since we are dealing with very dynamic sites, how is it possible to present this to a public without losing the focus, the process through time and the political and economic change? And there's also, you could say, an enigma in our own project. Sustainable archaeological routes can be seen as a contradiction. Actually, we shouldn't travel, we shouldn't use gasoline or planes or ferries, destroying our Mother Earth. But how can we cope with this? It's when it is very important to see the sites, to experience the landscape. And as a last question, how can we strengthen the connections with commercial partners that are outside our own circle of friends and colleagues, and a public that comes running whenever there is an archaeological excavation? How can we cooperate with commercial partners? And Carolina, you touched a little about touch this a little in the end of your lecture. So I hope this will be a good start for discussions later, and thank you for listening.